welcome back, everyone. Today, our special guest is Dennis Mortensen. Dennis is an expert in leveraging data to deliver business insights. He is a serial entrepreneur. He has built and successfully exited several companies before founding X.ai in 2014. That is his current company. Along with co-founders Matt Casey and Marcos Bellinger, Dennis set out to solve a painful problem which we've all experienced at one point or another, and that is scheduling meetings. He does this through a sophisticated AI platform that saves people time and effort. Dennis is a recognized leader, author, and university instructor in the field of digital data and analytics. He's originally from Denmark and relocated to New York with his family. Thanks for joining us today, Dennis.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I wanted to throw out there that you've exited a few different companies. Any specific learnings that you got from that as you thought about starting your new venture?
You learn something from any venture. You pick up some habits. You have a few wins, big and small, and you carry them with you from one venture to the next. I would like to believe that our understanding of how to extract value from data, which have been, if anything, a threat from the very beginning, 24 some odd years ago to today, is something that has served us well, where it can be very easy to kind of imagine what type of prediction you might be able to make just because you can formulate some sort of sentence around, oh, if I could predict this, then people would be happier. Yeah, we all want to make predictions, but can you actually do it at high accuracy? So I think that is something where we've stayed sober, and that has been something that we needed because language is just not a solved science. And whenever you try to attack a unsolved science, you should just assume that you will die a soon and sudden death. And for us, I think we've been very sober about not solving language, but perhaps being able to carve out a corner of the language universe and potentially solve that.
And really quickly here, with those exits in mind, did you start the business with the idea, look, I want to build this to exit, or I'm building a high cash flow business that could, that I'm going to stick with for the long term?
I think there's many business ideas for where the plan is cash flow, or that is really the only option. That restaurant won't turn into Instagram. It might just be providing you some honest cash flow. Now, in software, I'm not so sure you can really plan for the outcome. What I do think you can plan for is good product and happy customers.
Right.
If you do enough of that, then opportunities will arrive. That could be for additional growth, good cash flow, M&A, any number of things. But trying to plan for some sort of specific outcome seems unlikely, or if anything, to be an anchor that will kind of hinder you from doing the right things. So I try not to do that. I just try to build good product and make happy customers. And if you continue to do so, you just have more opportunities tomorrow.
Yeah, very interesting. And even in my experience as an investor in software companies, right, it was, our thought process was, let's just build a good business, right? You build a good business that adds value, you'll have opportunities on both ends, right? Versus being stuck to, it's either get acquired by Google or bust, right?
And it seems a little sad if the only thing you think about on day one is, how can I exit this? Because then you're in it for the money. And I think startup, if anything, is probably more like professional sports than you being a manager at some corporation, which is that if you do it for the money, you're probably not going to be any good at it. If you do it for the love of the sport, you know what? You probably end up making a lot of money. And good on you. You need to do it for the love of the sport. As in, if it's just for the contract, you'll do the bare minimum to get that contract, and you might actually not get the contract. And I think in startup, you have to love the journey, because the journey is on a minute by minute basis, not super fun. But if you zoom out a little bit, as in just like training, you're just about to throw up. Well, throwing up is not fun, but if you zoom out a little bit, yesterday, oh, that was a good day. As in, we worked out for 9 hours. We did all the things we kind of talked about. I almost feel better, or I can imagine me being better today. If I keep this up and do it over and over again, I'll make a team. And I think in startup, well, day to day, I'm not closing any customers today. Or perhaps I'm kind of having a bottoms up kind of methodology. So I'll close some customers today, but certainly conceptually, I'm not closing a 40,000 seat contract right after closing this call with you. But hey, I'm making some effort so that, well, I'm closer to closing some of those contracts. And I think that is the way you should play the game. And I know this might be just too high level, but that's just how I think about startup.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Perspective there. And it's all along those lines. It reminds me of a quote Kobe Bryant had, where he says something like, the game actually got easier when I got to the NBA, because everyone, once people started to get paid, they stopped doing what it took to get to the NBA, right? And he's like, that's why Michael Jordan won all those MFing rings, right? So, I think about that from the startup and the software company perspective. And you see a lot of companies, maybe they hit the million mark or they hit the $10 million mark where, all right, mostly the $10 million mark, we're like, all right, well, I've got a good amount of income. We've got a legitimate business. So then do you begin to relax versus it being, something you're passionate about and you want to figure out ways, how do I turn the dial to accelerate past that $10 million mark? So there's kind of that division between folks who get stuck there and the folks who, all right, I'm in the league now. How do I get into, how do I come in all-star? How do I become a Hall of Famer?
And it's just like a funnel, right? So you're talking about what happens towards the end of the funnel. Right. Given most people are just in their backyard fooling around, dreaming about what could be one day. And that is most entrepreneurs. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. That is really just the love of the game. Let's just go play for a couple of hours, me and my buddy. And that's cool. Right. Just like every day after school, we would go play soccer, being European and all. And that's what we did. I'm sure you did something different, but really the same thing. School's over. Let's go play some ball. And it was that love for where some just stayed another 2 hours because they really liked it. And some of them kind of moved down that funnel. And in startup, that is kind of making your first customer. That is getting to kind of magical 83K MRR. That is kind of getting to some other kind of magical set of inflection points along the way. But the funnel gets thinner and thinner. And a lot of people die along the way.
Great points there. So let's hop into what you guys are doing over there with X.ai. And I want to frame the conversation with kind of thinking through, who is the customer that's primarily using the product today? And what's the major frustration that they have?
So I think it's somewhat obvious that we didn't have some sort of unique epiphany for where we're the only ones who figured out that there was pain attached to that of setting up a meeting. As in, you and me figured this out exactly 2 hours out of college. That, so this is what my job looks like. Scheduling meetings. Well, it's not that scheduling meetings is difficult. Any human being can figure that out. It's just that it's yet another chore in my inbox that I'd rather be without. Just like it's not difficult to get reimbursed $12 for that Pret sandwich I'm going to buy a little bit later today. It's that it's yet another chore that doesn't rhyme with what I was hired to do. So the primary pain is this kind of very simple but annoying pain of, I want to meet with these people, but I don't really want to do the work to make it happen. We already agreed that, you and me should talk. It doesn't matter that we talk today at 10, 11, tomorrow at noon. It's just that you and me wanted to talk, and that's the part. So we're trying to figure out, how do we remove that chore from your inbox or any other kind of communication channel? Now, given we were not kind of unique in having that epiphany, that means that you'd had plenty of companies over the years who tried to do this, and most of them died. Not because they were not tuned in or trying to kind of solve it. It was just that there was a ton of kind of obstacles. And this particular pain comes in small increments. So when you do your taxes, it comes in one big 7-hour pain, one Sunday every April for where, well, today's the day, or however you do it. You might have a slightly more coordinated way, but for most people, it's that kind of dread of having to do it. Scheduling meetings comes in mostly 130-second pain point where, oh, shit, I need to get back to Dennis. Can you do next Thursday? Send. And then I just hope Dennis replies. Now, what we then came up with was something for where, how can I take this human process and turn it into a machine process? So we created this intelligent agent for where you can CC in Amy or Andrew or just scheduler. You don't have to kind of humanize it and say, hey, scheduler, find some time for Dennis and I first week of September for half an hour, hit his office, make admin optional, and call this Tech DD. Now, that request in natural language, even in my funny Danish English grammar, should be something that our agent, one, can recognize that I work for Dennis. Two, what did he ask me to do? Three, what calendars is connected to the system? What preferences did he attach to it? And given that, who should I then reach out to? And do so immediately. Now, that seems like such a tiny thing for where Dennis, that sounds nifty and sweet. Tell me what you're really working on. Well, that is it. I'm just the guy who schedules meetings. But then again, you can take other ventures. Take something as simple as signing contracts online. You and me are sadly old enough to remember that 5 years ago, all the contracts you and me signed was contract, print, sign, scan, turn to the PDF, and send back. That's not difficult. I just fucking hated it. I said, oh, I got these 3 contracts. I'll sign them a little bit later because there's this whole little dance I need to do to kind of make that happen. If you sent me a contract today and asked me to kind of print it out and sign it, take a set of pictures and send it back to you, you sound crazy. As in, that just disappeared. As in, everybody added that to their stack. And that turned from really decade and a half, it was like a 10, 20, $30 million TAM. But then we blinked, or it looked like we blinked. And then over 3, 4, 5 years, it turned into, however we measure it, $2-3 billion TAM. Damn. As in, just went from manual to software. In scheduling, and we can pick other industries, it seems equally likely to me, almost inevitable. And I know I'm biased here, so anybody who's listening, say, Dennis, you're crazy. Yeah, I know, but that's my bet. But it certainly seems not crazy to suggest that it's going to be equally inevitable that we will all have some software solution to schedule our meetings. Could be the simplest of solutions where I just need a Calendly type page. We do that as well. I need an agent. I need many things, but you need to, at some point, surrender to the fact that you should not do this yourself. And if that happens, which I believe it will, and I hope I'm going to be one of the winners, I might not, and that's cool. I want to ride that wave and that TAM from today. This whole industry is still really less than $50 million TAM. But what if that turns into $2 or $3 billion? Well, then you got 4 or 5 contenders. I'm one of them. That could be nice. Of course, I need to stay alive long enough to kind of ride that wave, and we can talk about what you do to kind of make that happen. Having said that, though, July was our best month ever. And I don't think just our best month ever. I think if you called on some of the others, they would also have had a very good spring and early summer.
Yeah, no, I've definitely seen where any applications, any software that are really enhancing people's capability to work remotely is, definitely, those are definitely exploding right now. So, the interesting thing is as you think about processes, a lot of times when you think about how artificial intelligence comes into play, you want to outline, what's step A, what's step B, what's step C, what's step D, right? And then which of these steps could we automate? Or do we automate the entire process? So kind of thinking about the capabilities of artificial intelligence, I guess, you guys would start with, we need to schedule a meeting, right? Maybe an email comes in, hey, Dennis, we should catch up real soon here. All right. And then there's the end point, meetings on the calendar, right? Yep. Can you talk about how you thought about the process of let's use artificial intelligence to take us through the remainder of that, and at what point does the AI step in and take over?
AI is obviously a difficult term or interesting term to try to define, but let me at least point out two interesting buckets of predictions that we need to make, which we could think of as AI. One is that we saw an opportunity in not forcing you to context switch, meaning that you're on the subway, you're on your mobile, there's just 15 minutes from here to Union Square, so I can just clean up that inbox a little bit. But one of them is an email from Darius saying, hey, Dennis, I'm going to be in Manhattan. You got time to meet up for a Diet Coke? And really, for most people, there'll be a host of emails that rhyme with that. Customers, friends, college buddies, leads, that they almost know at that very instance, 2 sentences in, whether they want to meet with that bloke or not. Now, from that moment where you want to meet with that individual, as in if you send me an email and say, hey, I'm going to be in Manhattan, I know, yeah, we should meet up for a Diet Coke.
Right.
But how do I go from, I now know I want to meet you, to make that happen? As in, I don't really care when you're here, but I do care about upon your arrival, that we actually get something on the calendar. And at best, you should pop by the office and we'll just walk the neighborhood or something like that. So I want to not have you context switch. So I want to be able to kind of sit on the subway and say, he's coming to the city, and just reply back and say, Darius, awesome. I've CC'd in Amy. She'll find an hour and a half for you to pop by the office when you're here. Now, as soon as I click send, this went from being my job and my responsibility to being the agent's job and the agent's responsibility. And that's the kind of second part. One, I don't want to go into some other application. I just want to sit in the very same inbox that I'm at and just kind of write out a reply. And then I want to kind of not be in charge of it. I don't want to have a little sticky note of, I need to kind of follow up and say, hey, so when are you arriving? I know you're super busy, but is it going to be in September? So once that happens, we obviously allow you to write something in natural language.
Right.
Language is just not a solved science. That is a major obstacle. And if I took the pool of money that we've raised and carved out a big chunk of it, it went into our ability to understand that request, that initial handover. I'll just give you some scope here. And for many startups, there'll be some initial hurdle for where you have no data to mean some data. We can talk about, but what does that even mean? But some data means a corpus which you can train on. And our scope was one for we had 100 people-ish, full-time, for 4 years, sit and label about 32 million distinct data points. Now, then you can move on from there to potential synthetic data and all sorts of other things, but at some beginning, you probably need to source that data yourself. Sometimes it comes at a discount, sometimes it comes at a premium. And for us, it kind of came at a premium. And I'm sure you can imagine if you sit in that basement for 4 fucking years and label data, that becomes brutal. But on the other side, you have a superpower. As you can now understand things in this universe that no other people can understand. Whether I can turn that into a business advantage and kind of capitalize on it, that's a completely separate question. But I have a distinct piece of IP, and that superpower is what we're trying to kind of benefit from. That is the one bucket. We can understand meeting, scheduling, language. You can say all sorts of things. I'll give you a few examples here just on how complex that is. So you can't just hack something together this weekend and use, say, the Stanford NLP library and detect some temporal expressions. Oh, I picked up a Wednesday and I picked up a 1 o'clock and that's all good and fine. Who's to say that the temporal expressions are positive? How do you actually know that you're talking about me wanting to meet up? It could be that, yeah, let's do something next week. I am out Tuesday for that thing with my daughter. Well, how do you know that Tuesday is the one thing that you shouldn't do anything with? Right. Why is it that any email I get, which could be a reschedule, and say temporal expressions when the agent is being emailed is a signal for rescheduling, which is that it's already on the calendar. Then somebody sends you a text with some temporal expressions in. Yeah, but they always do because they write, have a great weekend. Have a good remainder of the week. Like, come on, why are you saying that? Because I now pick up on a signal that means nothing. So there's just a ton of complexity that we've been solving for. That's been very exciting. And I've been extremely proud of some of the work that we've done here, for where once we have time, we should go apply for those patents and write those papers that comes attached to it. We can talk about when you should go apply for patents. I have a whole kind of strong set of opinions about that. Right. The other bucket is, and that's the same, and you can take the first bucket I described here as being very similar to, let's say, self-driving cars. You'll have some cameras or lidars or how you take in what's in front of you, and you need to kind of be able to make a set of predictions of what do I think happens in this universe, because I certainly not make a model of the real world, so it'll be some sort of simplified model. And you'll take that in. But if you actually take that in, just like we take in language, you now need, and that is very much based on probabilities. Now, then you probably need a more deterministic model on, I now know what's happening in front of me. If it's a self-driving car or if it's meeting scheduling, I now understand what was being said. Just because you understand what was being said.
You need an action.
What exactly? How do you know what to do? As in, sure, if the car detects a baby in front of the car, my suggestion would be that the action is stop, but you need some idea of how to navigate that universe. And for us, we need to be able to navigate that meeting scheduling universe, as in a multi-participant meeting for where 6 people agreed, but then one person declined. Does that immediately trigger a reschedule? What if I spent the last 5 weeks trying to set up a meeting with the partners at SoftBank, one of our investors, and one of the associates kind of cancel? I don't care. As long as the partners are in the meeting, that meeting is staying on the books, right? So how do you know what action to take? And that is that second kind of big bucket. And we think of that as the scheduling engine. And the funny thing about the scheduling engine is that you can do tons of things with it, like creating what seems to be naive kind of scheduling pages, like calendar.x.ai/Dennis, and you can extract some availability. But based on that scheduling engine, which is, this is Dennis's multiple calendars, business and personal, his preferences, promises I made to people that might or might not meet up with Dennis. And if somebody wants a view with some particular lens on Dennis's availability, here's one view. And that is what we can use that scheduling engine to do. So those are the kind of the 2 AI buckets, if you will. Very long answer, sorry. This is turning into a mini therapy session for Dennis.
No worries, and that's helpful. So in terms of how someone is actually using or interacting, is this a plugin that they have in their browser? Is this an app they download to their computer, their phone?
So first of all, there's a free edition, and if you want to see applied AI, even just for the fun of it, as in I'm not selling you anything here, only my own cost of having to run the infrastructure, go sign up. What you're really signing up for, if you think about it, is a service. The first thing you do is you connect your calendar. Like any good system that needs to help you run your calendar needs visibility into your calendar. Once you've connected your calendar and you're set up on the service, you have immediate access to a set of emails, say Amy at X.ai, Andrew at X.ai, or scheduler at X.ai, all agents that do the same thing. You don't have to do any other thing now than being willing to email them, meaning that you can go tune your preferences, but really just 80 seconds in, you could immediately email scheduler at X.ai and say, hey, find me some time for Dennis and I. You can CC me in if you want. I'm Dennis at human.x.ai. In September for half an hour and call it this and that. And once you send in that email, we receive it. We recognize that you are a user. We look at your calendars. We look at your preferences. We look at the request. And then we assemble a response that we will send out to the potential guests in the meeting, trying to get some sort of consensus about when we're supposed to meet. That might not be immediate. Why? Well, because your guests are tardy. Right. So one of them won't reply. Then, depending on when you ask for it, we'll reach out and do a follow-up. Hey, remember that meeting that you asked for? Can we do this and that day, as I said? And we'll run it to conclusion. And if we don't conclude, we'll actually come back to you and say, hey, I reached out to these people on these days with these suggestions, but I was unable to kind of make it happen, like any good assistant would do. So you should probably reach out. And the reason we do that is that you can completely forget about it, knowing that if it does not happen, that ball is going to land back in my court, and I can look at it again. That's the one part. The other part is we gave you some of these basic tools that you can install the kind of Slack bot. Then you can do the exact same thing in Slack. Just / Amy, get me, Amit, and Lauren together later this afternoon for 10 minutes for that product enhancement. As I click return, given we have access to your coworkers' calendars, 3:10 in meeting room 9F, thumbs up. And we do a calendar page for you as well. So it's just a way for us to extract availability and expose it to the right people in the right context.
Okay.
That's
very helpful. Very helpful. Very helpful. And I want to kind of switch gears here. And you mentioned having a free version of the product, right? Now, if you go back to, once you finish the product, how did you get those first initial customers? Was it more of a freemium model? Did you, what was that process like?
So every one of my prior ventures have been in straight B2B. Mm-hmm. No kind of questions attached to that. Just straight B2B, 9-month sales cycles, wine and dining.
Right.
Good example, had 41 meetings up at Hearst over 19 months to close that contract in my last venture. Just actually doing B2B. So we originally started out with the idea that we would also be in B2B, and I actually think we will end in B2B. But given meeting scheduling is not yet a full-on line item where this is being bought, we ended up spending too much time trying to sell it. Like in the early days of, say, Dropbox, there was not a line item for storage. As in, storage, what do you mean? We've got a set of servers in the basement. We paid for that already. That is a line item that is already taken care of. So they figured out a different kind of go-to-market strategy, bottoms up, the rogue employee, I need to share 600 megabyte files with my agency, and all of a sudden it's spread throughout the organization. You know what? We didn't start like that. We ended up like that, bottoms up, free, freemium, tiny teams, into the SMB, then they kind of spread in the organization. You know what? We should have done that on day one, but we didn't. Mm-hmm. But what we did have was a lot of excitement. So we were able to run up a pretty dramatic wait list for our solution before we got started.
Simply because talk about building? Can you talk about building that excitement, right? It sounds like it's probably very marketing driven, but very interested in how you build that initial excitement around the product.
So I took it upon myself, given there was a longer kind of cold start, many things you can hack together over the weekend and kind of start to experiment and get the first kind of feedback. For us, there was just a lot of kind of grunt work, as in there's no two guys in Cambridge right now hacking together a self-driving car. and then on Monday asking their mom to take a drive. I said, there's going to be a long period of just raw R&D before you do anything. And we were somewhat similar. So we did two things. One, I actually hired a set of humans to do the job on one side, so I could collect some of the data to see what the dialogue would be back and forth and figure out what are some of the user requirements. So I simply just paid for a set of humans and asked 50 close-ish friends, hey, I'm going to be paying for an assistant. And I know you don't have one, so take advantage of my generosity here. And they ran with it, and they were super excited. I said, I'm in middle management, and Dennis is paying for an assistant. This is bloody awesome.
Right.
That I did on one part. Then on the other part, I took that excitement and bottled it and said, well, I have some friends. I think you could also be my friend, but I can't pay for it right now, but I might be. So sign up for this waitlist. It was not as simple as that. So I had a whole kind of growth scheme attached to it. We can talk about some of the kind of mechanics. And then we built that up, and that turned into hundreds of thousands of people on that wait list. It actually worked out way better than I had hoped for. Really, what you want is just the next 1,000 people, or the next 10,000 people to test on. But that really worked out well as a way to kind of get the whole thing off the ground.
Yeah, very interesting. So how did they become aware, though, right? How do you get to the 100,000? Is it that you're getting into publications? Is it word of mouth?
So I would say three things. One, there's an inherent virality to what we do, which is that you have tested my tool whether you like it or not, simply by the fact that I used my tool to schedule a meeting. So you got exposed, you're infected, whether that was a choice of your own. Hopefully you had a good experience. And that means you now have a small seed saying, you know what, I'll check this X.ai thing out one day. Then you get invited into another meeting. Damn it. Okay, now I will check it out this week. You forget. But then on the third meeting, okay, let me go sign up and see what all the fuss is about. So that set of initial test users, by all the meetings they did, they were helping me kind of spread the gospel. That was one.
Okay.
Two, if you ever want to ride a kind of hype wave, AI at that moment was a good one. And sometimes it works against you, but sometimes you can have it work for you. Just don't end up believing all the hype, but you can certainly ride a hype wave. So we were able to kind of ride that in the beginning for where, oh, this is interesting. This is a very definable use case for AI.
Yeah, in the sense that me as a user, I'm saying, wow, I've heard all about AI. I want to be one of the people who's using it.
Yeah, and it's something where I don't need to be a big-ass enterprise to use AI. I could just use it for myself. Hell, I can just sit over here and work for Spotify in recruitment and just sign up and use it like the rogue employee I am. And that actually helped us both kind of create that excitement and get enough of a kind of word out there to then have them talk about it. And we worked social mostly to kind of just have that reverberate around and help kind of sign up the next kind of set of waitlist users.
Awesome. And I know we got to be conscious of time here, but really quickly, last question. If you could go back to day one, knowing everything that you know now, what would that first 90 days look like for you?
First 90 days, I will answer it. I think that first anything, launch, this and that, is just a whole lot less important than we think it is in the very moment. Because we always take something as a launch, or we're so kind of married to it. But you know what? Whether you win that product hunt, Reddit, Hacker News lottery, doesn't matter really at all. What matters is that you come to work tomorrow, do more good work on the product, make another user happy, just grinding it out. First 90 days, I think if anything, of all my regrets, and there's plenty, it'll be one for where I wish I had been less married to the NLP challenge and spread out my resources more fairly across some of the other challenges. For where we found in the end that the vast majority of the NLP value is in the initial handover, a little bit less so further down the dialogue. It's really just the ability for the host to describe what I want to happen here. If you can understand that, I'll click a button a little bit later. But there was one where perhaps I had a little bit too much of a fetish. And perhaps that's the kind of CS grad deep inside me, where, it's just such a fun challenge, where I should have been a little bit less fetish around the NLP, I think. There you have it.
Okay, awesome. Well, that is all for time here. Dennis, thanks for joining us. Exciting use case for AI. I'm sure people have been able to take away a lot. We appreciate you joining us today.
This is fun. Should do it again.